I wanted closure, but not like this, Lord Jesus. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy.
Those are words from the sister of Emmanuel Stroud Sr., a Bibb County man found dead in mid-July. And just 3 months later, his son, Emmanuel Stroud Jr., was shot and killed. That same night, 5 other people were also shot. At the time, we talked with local pastors to see what they thought about the violence.
But it's just time out for the nonsense. Stop the killing, the guns, and the violence. Just time out for that.
Good evening and thanks for watching this special edition of WGXA News. I'm Katie Thurber. Tonight we're hosting a discussion about curbing violent crime in Macon-Bibb County. And just to let you know, in 2017, there were 30 homicides total just in Macon-Bibb. That's a record high. Right now, 10 of those cases are still unsolved. And we're just 2 months into 2018 and we've already seen 5 murders here. There's still 1 active case, and that's not even counting the amount of rapes or armed robberies that have happened in our area. Now, through the course of this hour, we'll be checking in with WGXA's Tavares Jones and WGXA's Eric Mock. They'll be kind of leading us through any comments on social media that any of you have, and you can feel free to tune in at home and comment, and we'll get some of those questions. Tavares Jones is also talking with more community leaders and community activists about what we can do about the crime. We'll get to them in just a second, but first we want to introduce you to our panel we'll be speaking with and discussing things with tonight. We have Bibb County Sheriff David Davis, activist Danny Glover, Commissioner Rabbi Larry Schlesinger, and Macon native Sierra Martin. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is obviously a major issue in Macon-Bibb, and we want to discuss solutions. We want to discuss the problems so we can get to solutions. But first, we're going to start with Mr. Glover over here, and we want to know what you do in the community, and then we'll go this way.
Well, sure. But first, I want to thank WGXA for hosting this very, very important discussion. I also want to thank Macon-Bibb residents for tuning in tonight. I think as an engaged community, you know, we all need to be cognizant of the issues that are facing our area. So my name is Danny Glover. I'm a 3rd generation Southside resident, and I have the distinct privilege of serving as the Executive Director of One South Community Development Corporation. We're currently working on the south side of Macon to use health, to use agriculture to combat blight and crime, what have you. As most recently, we just received a $500,000 grant to continue this work in our neighborhood. So I'm excited about this opportunity to bring my opinion and also talk about some strategies to move our community forward.
Perfect. Sheriff.
I'm Sheriff David Davis. I'm responsible with my staff to take care of the crime issues in this community, to investigate the crimes and to enlist the community support and to solve these crimes and to engage with everyone to come up with strategies and sort of look at what are some of the underlying causes and commonalities amongst many of these criminal incidents. So happy to be here, and thank you all for having this, and look forward to having a lively discussion.
Ms. Martin.
I'm Sierra Martin. I am a local youth advocate and Girl Scout troop leader. Thank you all so much for including me, especially as a Macon native, but also to speak on behalf of other community residents and including our voice in this discussion. Thank you.
And I'm Larry Schlesinger. I'm the Rabbi Emeritus at Temple Beth Israel in downtown Macon, also the District 2 representative on the Macon-Bibb County Commission. I serve on the Operations and Finance Committee as well as the Economic and Community Development Committee. I'm a chaplain with the Sheriff's Office, and thank you for inviting me. Delighted to be here, and I welcome the opportunity to address and interact with the community.
And thank all of you again for being here. We're looking forward to having a unique discussion, hopefully one that moves our community forward. Right now we're going to check in with WGXA's Eric Mock, who's live in the newsroom. He's been monitoring social media. Eric, what are people saying?
Katie, we're getting a lot of different comments on social media, a lot of people very interested in this discussion, and they want to definitely chime in on the topic of curbing violence here in Macon-Bibb County. Let's go to our first comment. This is from Deanna White. She says, Macon is literally being run into the ground by its wealthy community leaders that choose to build parks in poverty-stricken areas so that beauty might attract business while the homeless crowd the streets and the people go hungry. Poverty is driving people and kill just for a penny. We need to face the issue of the deficit not by taxing the people who are already poor, but by demanding the people who stole from our general funds to pay back that money. Don't blame the thugs for what our greedy corporate politicians have done to our own community. Stand up, become community leaders, because we can do better. Very strong words for Deanna White there, but I think inherent in her message is a topic of poverty. What does the role of poverty play in this, and how do we address that? We have another comment here on Facebook from Karen Blackstone DuBois, and she says, my concerns are that not enough is being done here and nationally regarding mental health. We adopted brothers with multiple diagnoses 6 years ago. I believe mental illness and guns in school are related, and yet my son only gets about 5 hours of IFI services a month. So for her, what she's saying, mental health, obviously a very, very important issue here. A lot of people are asking this question after the Parkland, Florida shooting that we saw just the other day. And so two very important topics, Katie, for our panelists from Facebook and from our viewers about, poverty, what kind of role does that play in this, and how do we address that? And also mental health, especially in our schools. Let's throw it back over to you, Katie.
All right, thanks, Eric. And Mr. Glover, I want to ask you that first question a lot about poverty in the area. What do you think is the connection between poverty and violent crime?
I mean, poverty is the exact connection to violent crime. And Ms. Deanna White, I thank you for asking that question, because that is true. That is truly the crux of the issue we're dealing with here. We're dealing with city leaders who have mismanaged our budget. So even if we wanted to add extra money in fighting crime, even if we wanted to give more resources to community groups doing the work, we don't have the money. In 2016, we ended that year with $8 million with an $8 million deficit. 2017, we voted to raise taxes up 4% on all Macon-Bibb citizens. Now, with the increase in insurance premiums, we're now facing an additional $5 million on top of the $8 million. So now we're at $13 million in a deficit. So before we can even start talking about violent crime, before we can even start talking about the strategies to move our community forward, we have to do a better job at managing the cities and the public's funds. Because I feel wholeheartedly that we have all the resources we need to solve this problem. It's time for us to really decide that this is the issue that we're going to make a priority, and that we're going to align all of the city's resources towards solving it. It's time to invest in those strategies that we know that works. We know that when people have jobs, that they're not going to be involved in crime. We know that when our citizenry is educated, they're more likely to not be involved in crime. So it's time for us to be serious about what we're investing in and divest from the systems we know that are producing results that are not indicative of where our community is trying to go.
Thank you for that. And Commissioner, some strong words from Mr. Glover and from that Facebook comment about city leaders. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I believe that the only cure for poverty is jobs, and more jobs. It's also education. There are a lot of good things that are, going on. I'll, point specifically to the Leader in Me program that's going into our school system. We've got a graduation rate that is going in the right direction, and that's up and up these days. So in order to bring good jobs, we have to have an educated workforce. The Chamber of Commerce is working on that. So there's a lot of good that's happening and maybe under the surface, but it's having its effect, and we're moving in the right direction.
What would you say in addressing that Facebook comment again, talking about money going towards different projects in the county, but not necessarily in maybe parts of the county that need it, that are seeing poverty, that are seeing crime?
Well, it depends on, what you define as, places in the county that need it. We're working in the Mill Hill area, which was, very depressed, turning that into an artistic colony. And in South Macon, we're putting a playground in on Linmore Avenue that's desperately needed for the children who are over here. They've got no place to go. So a lot of good projects are going on. I'm not sure that the public really knows the extent of those projects, but they're all designed to create a better quality of life here in Macon-Bibb County.
Ms. Martin, I wanted to bring you into the discussion. When you're working with youth in the community, is poverty an issue?
Certainly it's an issue, but I also wanted to touch on the second question as well. She mentioned mental health. Poverty and mental health are often connected, and I think that that's something that we should also discuss as well. Parents are concerned that if they have issues with their children's mental health addressed, that their child will be stigmatized in some way. So we need to take away the stigma initially, but in addition to that, we need to make it okay for people to reach out for these services, specifically children. Because if they're reached as children, then they won't have these, well, we hope that they won't experience these issues when they're older, but certainly poverty and I'd say mental health are connected for sure.
And possibly, yeah, parents who are dealing with these mental health issues with their kids, maybe they don't have the resources
Absolutely.
to get the help that their kids might need.
Well, and absolutely, and locally we do have resources available that I'm not sure people are aware of. If you were to go over to Mercer University, they do income-based counseling. So if you're in need of counseling, that's somewhere you can go. You can go over to Mercer University to their medical school, and that may be a local avenue for you to take that takes into account your situation, so you can afford to possibly receive those services.
Definitely. Sheriff, I wanted to ask you from a law enforcement standpoint, what do you have to say about poverty and violent crime?
Well, they go hand in hand. We have the statistics and the cases to prove that poverty and crime are related. The 30 homicides that we talked about, even the 5 that we've had so far this year, most all of them, the victims and the suspects fall into a certain income category or lack of income category. Many of them fall into a certain educational category. Many of them have mental health issues. Many of the violent crimes and even some of the property crimes that we see are people who have mental health issues and who are victims of poverty. And so economic development and education are the two most greatest crime prevention components you can think of. And so if we want to put money at things, someone asked me at a meeting I was at the other day, they had a great question. They asked me, the sheriff, how much money would it take for us to give you to make things better for you to be able to do your job? And I said, you know, I never would deny money, but we're doing okay. If you have an extra $1 million to put into something, some benefactor, put it in South Macon, put it in some of these neighborhoods where we have the blight, bring in job opportunities, bring in educational opportunities. That would make my job in law enforcement a whole lot easier than putting 100 more deputies on the road.
I was going to ask too, does that mean, yeah, that you put more patrols in areas with more poverty? But you're saying that's not quite the answer.
It is an answer and it is not. If you want to create a police state, yeah, give me $10 more million and I'll put a deputy on every street. But I can't put a deputy in a living room when a brother strangles his sister to death. So you cannot put law enforcement in every setting where violence or where conflict can go. You have to address some of those underlying issues, as we say, with poverty and with education. And if we can do that as a community, it helps solve some of those underlying crime issues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sheriff, and thank you all of you. We're going to head and check in with Tavares Jones, who's somewhere else in our WGXA studio and has a guest with him. Tavares.
Yeah, Katie, that's right. We're joined right now by Mayor Pro Tem of Macon-Bibb County, Al Tillman. He also serves the residents of District 9, including the Bloomfield neighborhood. Commissioner Tillman, thanks for being here tonight and offering your insight on this. As we've been hearing throughout our broadcast here, we know that violent crime in Macon has seen a surge over the past year in 2017. I want to put those numbers on the screen for you. There were a total of 30 homicides, 63 cases of rape, 320 robberies, 415 aggravated assaults, and we learned that that was an increase of 19% from 2016. Those violent crimes alone totaling just over 800 alone when it comes to violent crime. Commissioner Tillman, what is the solution, and do you see that being a solution that's attainable for Macon-Bibb County, one that we can see in the near future? What's your opinion on it?
I think sounds like we need some love, love. I mean, it's true. If you're uneducated, you're going to grow up and you're going to be poor and you're going to commit crimes. I think we talk about a lot of things, but one thing that we don't often talk about is you can be age 16 in the state of Georgia and decide on your own that you're going to drop out of school. Now, according to medical statistics, the brain has not fully developed to age 21. So I think we need to talk to our legislators about upping the requirement age before you can drop out of school. When the government is cutting education, I mean, this is what you have. I mean, a lot of people in our community live in every negative statistics. And so we've got to market and promote the positivities of each and every community. I mean, you know, you ask people, you know, about Hitler. You know, everybody knows about Hitler. Hitler did nothing good, but he's always marketed or promoted when something comes up about Hitler. So, you know, he hadn't done anything good. And so there's a lot of great things that's happening in our community that we need community groups and advocates to stand up for and share because people just don't know what's available to them. And so it's true. Education leads to, a lack of education leads to crime and poverty. And I just don't know, in looking at those numbers, how do you control, you know, someone who's at a Super Bowl game, betting on a Super Bowl game, and decides that somebody's not going to pay and there's gun violence that break out.
Right.
How do you control a 16-year-old from fighting and killing or choking his or her sister, allegedly? And so those are the things that we're faced with. And so, you know, love needs to be in the air.
And I want to follow up with you. You talked about state legislators changing laws. What do you say to the people who say that our local leaders here in Macon-Bibb County aren't doing enough? We hear that so often. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to just get involved and know what's happening, what you're interested in. You know, if people are interested in, you know, HIV and AIDS, Cancer Society, they tend to keep up with that. I think the government is doing a lot. I mean, we've got workforce development, who we've graduated a class of 20 to 30 young men and women that we pay for. If you are a convicted felon, there are opportunities for you. Your life is not over. The What If It Was Your Child initiative, so many initiatives. The Sheriff Department has considered the consequences, and people just don't know. And so we implore community groups, churches, advocates, to find out what's going on with your government. Just don't come down and say what your government is not doing, because I can give you a schedule of places I've been and things I participate in, but because you don't physically see it, because you're not involved, you know, in our community, we tend to always say what the black church is not doing. Well, every Sunday morning, the black church says the doors are open, you're welcome. And so we tend to always chastise them and other groups, but just about every church has a youth program and opportunities. Mm-hmm. If you're not going and participating, you don't know what's happening. If you're not participating in local government, we meet every first and third Tuesdays, and you know, unless you're talking about somebody's paycheck or tax money, then they're not interested. And so people just have to get involved and share and show the love back to these young men and women.
Gotcha. So guys, you heard it. The answer from Commissioner Tillman is a love, and he's saying the door is open when it comes to Macon-Bibb government. They have their meetings every so often. You can certainly go down and see what's being discussed that affects you directly in your neighborhood. Katie, we're going to talk to another person here local in the community, June O'Neill, who serves as the executive director of the Macon Mentors Project. She's going to give us some more insight and talk about how education plays a role in curbing the violent crime when it comes to our young people. We'll send it back to you, Katie.
All right, thanks, Tavares, and thank you, Commissioner. We hit the streets of Macon to find out what people around here think about violence in the community, and here's what we heard.
You usually see a lot of cops around here all the time, so I definitely feel that they're doing their job, and like you can't control everything.
I think I'd just like to see more awareness raised. With there being a college campus here, with there being elementary schools right here near Mercer, I want people to have awareness raised that, you know, there are going to be unsafe people in this area, and you need to be aware of that. You need to take steps to be proactive against that. I want to see people helping each other. I want to see people making sure that everyone's safe, you know, that you're getting to your car safe at night, that if you're going downtown, that somebody's there to bring you back. So it's a matter of people helping each other remain safe in this community.
And Sheriff Davis, that's kind of what you were saying earlier. It's not just law enforcement that can patrol and that can keep people safe. It's got to be other people too. Do any of you have anything else to add, or do you agree with what they're saying?
I think Commissioner Tillman, when he talks about the love, I think we need to be, something of a caring community. In other words, it's not just the responsibility of the sheriff's office to, address this problem. I mean, this is a community problem, and we all have a role to play in this. I will share a story with you. I had a friend come to me. He wanted a job, any job. So I called somebody I knew who offered what I would call outdoor menial work. The employer said, I'm going to give this guy 3 tests. One's going to be a drug test, one's going to be a criminal background check, the other's going to be a credit check. If he fails any one of them, he's not going to get the job. Well, the long and the short of it is he failed the criminal background check. So we have to, find ways for people who make mistakes and who have a, record in the criminal justice system. We have to find a way to be a caring community and forgive these people and give these people another chance, because if you've got that kind of a record, you've got 2, probably 3 strikes going into major employment situations. We've got to care about the people that live in this community, no matter who they are or what they've done.
Definitely. A great point to leave off from. We have much more to discuss coming up. We're also going to hear from somebody who was personally hurt by violence in her community. Stay with us.
We're supposed to bury our parents and not our children, but we're living in a time now that we are burying our children.
Welcome back to WGXA's Town Hall discussion on curbing violent crime in Macon. We're talking with a panel of local leaders, local activists, trying to find solutions to the problem of violent crime here in Macon. Right now, we're going to hear a story from a local person in the community who was touched by violent crime in a very real way.
What would you do? How would you feel if you was in a parent's position that have lost their child?
Macon community activist Faye Alexander knows loss.
You know what? It was my child. It was my child.
All 3 of her children, her sister, and several first cousins have all died, some from violence. Her son was murdered in Macon in 1994.
To hear that my son got killed, just being robbed, and you just killed my child. So I know what it's like to be that mother. I know what it's like.
Faye says after that, there were times she wanted to give up.
With me, I actually almost lost my mind with the death of my children. But God gave me an avenue to allow me to continue to live.
That avenue? Giving back to other mothers who have also lost loved ones. And she's taking a stand against the cycle of violence.
I know they say back in the old days that we're supposed to bury our parents and not our children, but we're living in a time now that we are burying our children.
Faye now looks after her grandchildren and has become a leader in the movement called What If It Was Your Child? It's a group working to fight violence in the community by partnering with Central Georgia Technical College to offer free courses. Anyone who wants to take the classes may sign up.
We're not going to be able to stop all the killings because they're going to happen, but I know that we can slow them down.
But Faye says putting an end to the murders will take a community effort.
So we got to come together as a city, as family, and as a people to stop this.
I'm sure all of you know Miss Alexander and her personal story and connection with this, but she talked about some of the things that we've kind of talked about before, and that's coming together as a community, but also classes, jobs, education. Mr. Glover, do you think enough of that's being done in the community?
Unfortunately, I don't think enough of that's been done as a community. I mean, like when you look at like just over the almost decade that I've been working in this space, you know, it's the same, you know, just the same repetitive actions each and every time one of these happen. You know, we have the visual, we have the balloon release, we have the service, everybody forgets, and then the next thing goes around. But to touch on Commissioner Tillman's point with love, yes, we need to all love each other as a community. Yes, we need to all love our fellow brother and our fellow sister. However, we need to show that love through our budget. All right, currently, we're dealing with a mass budget of $520 million. All right, 150 million of that goes to the general fund, and basically what that means is our commissioners, the people we elect, you know, to represent us, they have full discretion over how that money is spent. Over $90 million goes towards law enforcement and the courts. 20 million goes towards human services such as education, jobs, entrepreneurship program, and housing. So I submit to you today, if we as a community want to start taking this curbing violence thing serious, let's take it serious through the budget. Let's show the budget some love. Let's let the values of our community be reflected in how we spend our public dollars. Because right now, each citizen pays, let's see, about $562 per citizen for law enforcement, to a meager $125 per person for human services. That's a disparity of about $437. Let's close that disparity. Let's invest in the programs, jobs, education, housing, where we all agree on this panel that we know that works. And let's start looking at the systems in place now that aren't producing the results that our community wants to produce.
So are you suggesting not that we're raising taxes and getting more of that revenue to use, but just reallocating it?
Exactly, reallocate it. I'm sure, I mean, Sheriff Davis has been an active participant with the commissioners. You know, he hasn't been the type of sheriff that wants to sue the commissioner, sue the elected body, and that happens in across the state and across the country. You know, he knows what our community is going through. He knows the people, so he works with our commissioners, and I'm sure if Sheriff Davis, the commissioners, the mayor, other business leaders, other community leaders came together, we could find ways to really skim some of these budgets to reallocate that money towards the things we know work. So that's all I'm saying. It's a concept called investing and divesting. It's giving everybody a freedom to thrive. It's been pushed all over the country in Chicago, LA, Oakland, Detroit, and it's working. It's giving citizens an opportunity to be a participant in how the budget is made and how money is spent.
Commissioner, you know the city's budget and you know the resources. Is that something that's realistic here?
Well, we've been legally mandated to cut the budget 20% in consolidation. And we also cut the double taxation on the people who lived in the old city of Macon itself. So we've had to, you know, make significant cuts. I will say that, you know, for your basic public services, of which the sheriff office is one of our most important, we have to keep it funded in a way that's going to you know, serve the city. It's not cheap. Our you know, collective solid waste is not cheap. I mean, all of these things cost money, and you know, I always say I wish I had the magic wand that I could just wave and make things the way that we all want to see it. We are budgetarily, you know, limited in certain ways, and we just have to make sure that the basic services that are provided to the community are sound.
So do you think that there's any wiggle room in reallocating, as Mr. Glover was saying?
Well, we go through the budget, you know, each and every year, and everybody has their, you know, own ideas, their own pet projects, and we come to a consensus as a commission, along with the mayor and his administration, the numbers that they propose, the best that we can to really maximize each and every dollar that our citizens ante up for the important basic services that we provide.
We're going to check in with WGXA's Eric Mock, who's been monitoring social media throughout this discussion. Eric, what are you seeing?
Katie, we're getting a lot of comments coming in again on Facebook. Let me just read you a couple here. This first one is from Charles Green. He says, crime is reduced when a community has an educated workforce and the business community provides quality jobs. So he's basically giving forth a solution here. I'm sure a tough solution. That's going to take a lot of work from, especially a local government and community leaders, everyone involved there. Now, we have a very interesting question as well from Clarence Mize here on our Facebook. He says, my question is, how many of these violent offenders are recidivist offenders who were already out on probation, parole, good behavior, etc.? Would it be reasonable to assume if 20 years meant 20 years, there would be fewer opportunities outside of the confines of their institution? I think that's a very interesting question I'd like to pose to Sheriff Davis, but anyone else who wants to chime in on that, what's the role of recidivism, people going into prison and getting spat right back out, in the role of these violent crimes? Katie, let's send it back over to you.
Sheriff Davis.
There is a part of that. If you take our jail count, about anywhere from 75 to 80% of the people who are in our jail now are recidivists. They have been there before. Some of the more recent cases that we've had, both here locally and across this region, have been people who have recently not long been released from prison. Our investigators stopped the beginnings of a serial rapist just last week. He had already assaulted 3 women in one night, and an off-duty investigator saw him walking down the street. They got him and arrested him. He had only been out of prison just a few weeks, and so that does play a role in it. We're seeing that component in some of our property crime suspects, where they had been sentenced to long sentences but had been released just after very few months or even just a couple of years on a sentence. So that plays a part into it. But I think that the governor has done a lot of criminal justice reform, which has reduced some of the people in prisons, which has even reduced a lot of people in county jails, and in ways that's positive. But the communities and even the state in some ways has not taken up that slack. Just because somebody gets out of prison, whether they've served 20 years or 2 years on a 20-year sentence, if they don't have a job to come back to and they don't have an opportunity or they don't have an education, they're going to go back to what they know best. And if that happens to be breaking in houses or robbing people, that's what they're going to do. So we need to pick that piece up in this reentry component to get folks a job or get somebody meaningful skills, because if not, they're going to become wandering aimlessly and get back into criminal activity.
And that goes back to the point I made before the break, that people who have blemishes on their records often are completely denied the opportunity to have a job. So we have to become that caring community and give offenders a second chance in order to make good. Otherwise, they have no choice but to go back to the behavior that the sheriff just described.
And one of the things that Commissioner Tillman championed this last year, the ban the box move, where when somebody does an application, it does not ask them right off if they've had a criminal record, because some people will just look at that application, and if they see that check mark that they've had a criminal record, they're going to put that application to the side and not even consider them anymore. I'll admit, I've even hired people at the sheriff's office, both as deputies and as civilian staff, who have been arrested, who have had some things that criminal acts in their background. But this is years ago. They've paid their debt. They become productive citizens, and they've moved on from it. So we need to, as Commissioner Schlesinger said, we need to let people have a chance to correct themselves and to forgive those mistakes.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll have more to discuss coming right up. Stay with us.
You know, and it's dragging the entire community down. And as I say, that's not just Macon, that's all over the country.
It's not a game when people lose their lives.
in our communities, it's serious. And we are going to take the steps necessary to bring back a safe community in Middle Georgia. Thank you.
That was an emotional Mayor Randy Toms in Warner Robins. That was in late January, making a plea to the community to stop the violence, but also get information leading to a suspect in a string of violent crimes. Now, in that press conference, he also talked about he recommended that everyone get a gun and learn how to use it. He also talked about city employees. He wanted to reverse the ban on city employees bringing a gun to work. Now that kind of blew up online, that kind of ignited a lot of tempers. What do you all think about getting more guns into the situation, having each person learning how to use it? Do you think that's a solution or not?
It'd be nice if he maybe mentioned something about courses being held or something. There was no caveat to go along with that. It was more, okay, we'd like to, and I mean, again, that was his emotional plea, and maybe it was not on the top of his head. It was maybe just something coming from the heart. I think we all understand when people have, or tell other people that they'd like them to themselves to be protected, and they'd like to take steps to protect themselves. But a huge part of gun violence is a lack of education. People not knowing how to properly use guns, properly store guns, especially when you have children in the home and things of that nature. You don't want children to accidentally come upon those guns, because if you're bringing them to work, you're still storing them at home. So there has to be some type of educational component to go along with any of that, which wasn't mentioned. So maybe if that was something that had been mentioned, it would have been seen as a less incendiary statement.
Mm-hmm. He did say something about learning how to use them and talked about some kind of training that could go into place. But Sheriff Davis, from a law enforcement standpoint, do you think that would help your deputies?
Well, there have been many documented cases where private citizens who have firearms and who have a gun have been able to stop violent situations, have been able to protect themselves as well as others. But those individuals are people who have some training. I wish that as part of being able to get a concealed carry permit in Georgia, that you have to mandate training. We have to mandate training to drive a car before you can get a driver's license. So why not firearms training? And that way, people know when you put a gun in your hand, you don't realize sometimes. I think people don't that is a very serious thing that could take a life. And a person has to decide in their mind, if I start to carry a gun, do I have what it takes if I have to shoot and kill somebody? Because that is eventually what may have to happen if you decide that you want to carry a firearm. And then for employees and that sort of thing, that's up to any municipality, any government. But there are issues of training, there's issues of liability, and those kinds of things. So while they are helpful and they can serve a purpose, I think that training component needs to be in there. Someone needs to be versed in when they can shoot and how to shoot.
I think we would all be shocked and even terrified by the number of unregistered, illegal, handguns that are on the street these days. We just had the incident of that 15-year-old about a week, 10 days ago, who was out at 1:30 in the morning and got into a gunfight with people who were attempting to rob him. There are a lot of guns that are out there on the street, and I can sympathize with what Mayor Toms was saying. I don't know that is the solution to getting those illegal guns off the street, though.
Definitely. And we spoke to some more local leaders here in Macon Bibb just about the violence and what to do. Here's what they had to say.
I'm afraid we've got to adopt more of a proactive part, and that really probably falls on the mayor and the commission to develop programs that try to inspire young people to a productive life of gainful employment, as opposed to dropping out of school, having no means of support, not able to find a job, and resulting then to gangs and drugs and violence, a kind of thing that we read about. So we've got to find a way to be proactive in this and to try to turn young people around before they drop out of school and before they get to a point where they do something as senseless as this.
So as far as holding folks accountable, that's going fine, but what I would really like to see, and what I'm hoping to develop, is a system that intervenes with children who are at risk, particularly at school, but also through DFACS, to target those individuals who need our help, who are still young, to where we can redirect them towards a more productive future and prevent them from ever coming into the courthouse.
Interesting solutions brought on, and I know, Ms. Martin, you wanted to talk about other community programs, which is something that Mayor Rickert was talking about, that we need those in place to kind of stop it from even happening.
Well, certainly. One thing that Commissioner Tillman touched on previously was the Consider the Consequences program. I'll openly state that's not exactly a program that I'm on board with. There's been much research that states that programs like that are usually not very beneficial. They rarely have the positive impact that we're hoping. However, there is a portion of the Consider the Consequences program that I think would be incredibly beneficial, and that's the life skills portion of the program that's offered following you taking the class. I think it would be great if that life skills program was just generally offered. I think it'd be wonderful if children did not have to be exposed to the Consider the Consequences program in order to be a part of that. It's a once a month Saturday. I think it's one Saturday a month after they've gone through the program. It'd be great if they offered that for children generally. If that was something they could be a part of. When I called, they stated you had to complete the program in order to participate. I think that when we were talking about reallocation of funds and maybe moving some things around, it'd be great to have that program be given priority. To have programs such as that for our youth, teenagers, and you could also have them for adults, and that goes back to the recidivism rate that we spoke about previously as well. If those programs were available for people following their exit from jail or prison, this may be something that's an avenue to cut down on recidivism, but also, again, that's community engagement. These programs usually have a mentoring aspect to them, and that's something that June O'Neill can speak to when she's on, and she can speak to how important mentorship is. It's not just important for children and youth; it's very important for adults to be able to see other adults doing well. And again, if we're going to talk about love and we're going to talk about community, we are all supposed to be here to support one another. And I think that that'd be something very great if we had that life skills program given priority.
And speaking of Miss O'Neill, WGXA's Tavares Jones is actually in the WGXA newsroom with her right now. Tavares.
Yeah, Katie, as you said, I'm joined with Miss June O'Neill, who serves as the Executive Director of the Macon Mentors Project. Miss June, thank you for being here. I've seen firsthand the work that the program has done in the community. We know that you have a passion for our young people in Macon-Bibb County, and the program has had great success. We know that students graduate who are involved in the program, and you guys have kind of put a curtail on things as far as drug involvement, crime. Just speak to that for me. How has this program been successful? What's the current problem, and where do you see this community going when it comes to our young people?
Well, I want to give a shout out first to my children, to Drake and Shamika, because they are very successful, very proud of them. And I think when children in the community tell me that it's easier to get a gun than a job, that means we have a problem.
And I know, June, you said that people talk all the time. We have these conversations. We have round tables. We have...
And it is time to quit talking. I am tired of talking. I'm tired of marching. It is time for people to step up to the plate and mentor these young people that have raised their hand and asked for help. I've got 52 children on my waiting list. I've got 48 boys over at Appling, and I've got 60 over at Ballard Hudson, 60 strong in the Appling Gents. We've got over 200 young people that have asked for help, and we need people to volunteer, because when children say, I'm drowning, I'm having difficulty at school, I'm having difficulty in my neighborhood, and nobody listens, they stop talking, they stop asking, they go the other way. The street is always calling their name.
And speaking of that, just kind of touch on some of the things that your protege, as you call them, have seen in their neighborhood. What are they seeing every day in their neighborhoods?
Violence, drug deals being made, people running across town carrying a package, and the children tell me they could make more money in a weekend than I make all month working 60 hours a week.
Wow. So we know there's certainly a problem. Ms. June, we thank you for the work that you're doing. And you said you're in need of mentors. We do have a number for you if you want to get involved with the Making Mentors program. That number you can dial. It's 478-765-8624. And Ms. June, you say there is a middle school population of students that need mentors. So we would certainly encourage you to get involved and mentor our youth, the ones that are in the most need of your mentorship. Katie, we're going to send it back to you.
Tavares, June, thank you so much. We're going to a quick break, but stay with us. We're rounding out this WGXA discussion on curbing violent crime. Stay with us.
From a mother, you know, to the community, or, you know, whoever's watching this, to help the police out. Don't be scared to go and speak out, because senseless acts like this needs to stop. You know, too many of our young people are dying from stupid stuff.
Welcome back to WGXA's Town Hall discussion on curbing violent crime in Macon. I'm Katie Thurber. We've been having a great discussion with local panelists, community leaders, and activists. But right now we're checking in with social media with Eric Mock, who's in our WGXA newsroom. Eric, what are you seeing?
Katie, a lot of comments coming. We have a Facebook Live video up right now. A lot of people participating right now. We're going to take you first with David Reed's comment here on our social page. He says, "Same issue I had in Warner Robins. How do you get more in the community involved? We had almost 300 show up out of 74,000 residents." I'm assuming that's at a town hall they held there in Warner Robins. "This broadcast has only 10 viewers online. How do you make people aware to have them care and be part of the solution?" Very interesting question from David Reed. How do you get people off the couch into the community and involved to be part of the solution? A couple other very interesting comments here. Carol Williams saying, "No more guns. That makes the police jobs harder and more dangerous." So we were talking about guns earlier. She seems to be the impression that we just don't need guns just anywhere. Stephen Snow, he also says, you know, the problem is that if there's a friend or a loved one, they turn the other way. He says, "Quit supporting their illegal activities. Turn everyone in when you suspect criminal activity." So even if he's saying the problem is people know each other, they don't want to get each other in trouble if they have done something criminal. Lots of very interesting questions. Very interested to hear some responses to David Reed's comment about how do you get more people involved in the community, in the solution. So Katie, definitely want to hand that back over to you guys for our panelists to answer some of these great questions we've gotten from our Facebook participation tonight.
And Mr. Glover, I want to ask you that. So how do you get people off the couch and participating in discussions like this and wanting to make changes?
Gotcha. You got to meet people where they are. I mean, I hear a lot about, you know, people need to step up. They need to find the information, make themselves aware. But when it's time for a vote, where do the elected officials and the politicians go? They go straight to the people. So that same thing needs to be turned when they're serving the people as legislators. We need to meet our people where they are and take them where we want to be as a city. And that includes establishing neighborhood associations. One thing I've noticed with establishing Gateway Heights and the work we're doing on the South Side with One South Community Development Corporation is, as we're starting this neighborhood association, it's causing more people to come and get more involved. They want to know what's happening at the planning and zoning meeting. You know, they want to know, hey, Danny, how's everything going at the land bank authority? Did we get the land yet? So they're asking those type of questions that they wouldn't normally know about had the neighborhood association not been in place. I submit to you, like, that's one thing that we should focus on more in terms of community development, is making sure we have community organizers working in some of these the places of high crime and high violence that are working with those neighbors to form their own neighborhood association so they can start addressing their own issues. That's how you get people involved. We got to quit blaming our citizens for not coming to get the information. That's just so unfair, and that's just such an easy, quit using the people as a scapegoat for not getting information. If you're passing laws, if you're passing policies that are supposed to be important to the people, take it to them by any means necessary. Host a town hall, go to the churches, go to the grocery store, go to Wings Cafe or whatever cafe that exists just to get the information to the people.
Anybody else have something to say about community involvement?
Everybody, each citizen has the potential to be a community activist, and it's really their responsibility. We need as many people expressing their concern and doing things to, improve the community. It's not up to the 10 locally elected officials in the Macon-Bibb County Commission. It's up to each and every citizen to make this the kind of place that we really have the potential to be. So we're really looking to the citizens, and particularly the citizens we represent, to really, kind of pick up the standard and lead us in the direction that they would like this community to go.
So you're saying it's both sides, both of you are kind of saying that you want the citizens to be more involved and to tell you, and you also want leaders and local leaders to say, hey, come on, citizens, and talk to us.
Well, let's just have an honest conversation about this. We're talking about some of the most impoverished people in the state of Georgia. All right, we're talking about people that live in some of the biggest food deserts, people who don't have access to health care, people who have family members and friends going through diabetes, people who can't afford to get their kids to and from school without having to bum a ride. Those are the same people you're asking to come and meet you at 700 Poplar Street to solve community issues. If this is important to us as a community, the leaders that we elect to do our bidding, you would hope that they would come and meet us in the community. And Rabbi Schlesinger has done a great job at this. He's worked hand in hand with the SMART organization off of Houston Avenue and making sure that they're established and making sure that their SMART Park and Chess Park is built. My Commissioner Virgil Watkins has done an amazing job with supporting our projects and what have you. But it needs to be more of that. It needs to be more reaching out, and it works. We see what happens. On this, everybody's talking about the South Side for the first time in almost 10 to 20 years. Nothing was happening over here. You have Antonio Lewis on the other side of Eisenhower working with SMART and building that side. You have One South Community Development Corporation organization I represent on the other side of Eisenhower working, and we're both working in spaces that have been disinvested in over the last 20 years. So when you go to the people, when you show them that this is how it works, this is how it's done, they make it happen.
I do have to cut you off there. Thank you so much for all of your input. A lot to discuss, a lot of good points made by all of you. And thank all of you for tuning in to watch our town hall discussion. I'll see all of you at 11.